Alright, and welcome back. Getting close to the end on the videos for the tail cone. This is going to be, I think, the second to last video in this series actually, or pretty close to. In this video I am going to be putting on the horizontal stabilizer, which you see me doing now, and I'm torquing it down. The front matter of the instructions have the torque values for the various size bolts, and the AN3s, which are what the bolts are for the forward end of this horizontal stabilizer. I believe they're torqued to about 28 inch-pounds, and so I torque them down into place just to make sure everything's lined up correctly. So that way, when you're putting on the elevators and the rudders and the vertical stabilizer and all that, everything is lined up correctly, or as close to correctly as can be. So going through right now, I'm taking off the access panels in the aft end of the tail cone. That way you can get to the forward side of the vertical stabilizer to torque it in place, to torque the bolts for the vertical stabilizer in place. There's a bracket that you mount to the forward end of the horizontal stabilizer frame there, and that's where the vertical stabilizer will bolt into place on the forward end of it. And then the instructions have you put an anti-seize paste between the face of that bracket and the forward spar of the vertical stabilizer. So now just going through and putting the wiring through the vertical stabilizer aft spar, and that's for the tail light on the vertical stabilizer. And then we'll go through here and I'll start torquing the bolts in place for the vertical stabilizer to put in to attach it to the tail cone. So this is the part of the build where it's actually starting to look like an actual part of an airplane. For the first time, it has the majority of all the pieces bolted together, and it's really starting to come together and look like an actual airplane. So right now, just going through and, like I said, attaching the forward end of the vertical stabilizer, getting everything ready to start hanging the elevators and the rudder. Now the elevators I've already worked with mostly and gotten them ready to hang and balance and all that. But it's all been while the horizontal stabilizer was in its bracket, in its holding bracket, I guess, for lack of a better term. And so it's a bit of a different experience trying to hang them while it's horizontal. And I thought I would have to get a second person to assist me in getting it installed, but actually they weren't too terribly bad in installing in place. Right now I've got the two sawhorses that you see there underneath the tail cone itself, but I've also got two other sawhorses, one under either end of the horizontal stabilizer with a cardboard box, basically to hold the stabilizer in place so the whole thing is balanced. Otherwise, it has a good chance of tipping over one side or the other. So to make it easier to manipulate and get around and move around without worrying about tipping it all over and damaging something, I've got the two sawhorses on either end of the horizontal stabilizer there to hold it in place. But as I get this torqued down again, these are the AN3 bolts for the most part. I think there are two AN4 bolts which have a different torque value. And again, all of the torque specs are in the front matter of the instructions just before the electrical description, the electrical instructions. So anyway, now I'm working on the rudder, getting ready to hang it onto the vertical stabilizer. The rudder has the three bearings that they're the eyelet bearings. So you bolt them into place, you screw them in, and then the instructions tell you to make sure that the center of the eyelet is so many millimeters away from the forward spar, and all three are different, so make sure you don't make them all the same distance. But the pain is that you focus on the top and the bottom bearing, and you leave the middle one alone according to the instructions. But then once you get everything settled, you go and you put the bolt, or you attempt to put the bolt into the center bearing. And that's where I came to find out that it was off significantly. So I would actually go ahead and work with all three bearings each time you manipulate the rudder and try to hang it. And gonna give you a heads up now, I had to hang this thing probably 8 or 9 different times to try to get the bearings at the right distance to get rid of the rub. And the rub that I have, here's my first attempt at hanging the rudder. The rub that I had was actually, if you put in a left full rudder, it would rub up against the vertical stabilizer skin. And so my first efforts were geared towards trying to move those bearings in or out, to try to move the rudder away from the skin to try to get rid of the rub. Well, it would either get better or worse, but it would never go away. So I got it all straightened out and looked at all the gaps, and especially the gap at the top, and made sure everything was lined up decently correctly. And eventually I read the instructions, and it actually tells you that you can go ahead and file away at the vertical stabilizer skins as needed to a point to get rid of the rubs. And so that's what I would recommend. Hang the the rudder, and if it's only rubbing on one deflection one way or the other, and you can tell that it's definitely from the skin of the vertical stabilizer rubbing up against the rudder and not the leading edge of the rudder rubbing up against the frame of the vertical stabilizer, then you can go ahead and just file that skin away a little bit. And again, the instructions tell you, how much you can remove, so you just got to be careful of that. And then once you get it set up, then you're good to go, and you just make sure that all three bearings will be able to put a bolt through, and then you're set. So it's actually not too terribly difficult. It just took me 7 or 8 or 20 times trying to get it installed before I read that note. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and let this go. I don't have very many videos left. I'm almost done with the tail cone, and I'm looking forward to starting on the wings. But we'll catch you guys next time around. Thanks for watching.